As usual, I'll wait a few moments for everyone to make it into the room. All right, I think we're all here, so I will get started. Good morning. It is May 10th, I believe. Yes, May 10th. This is day 7 in the Phase 1B hearing on the Kern River applications. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. I will abbreviate our usual introductions to some extent this morning, but I will note that this hearing is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is being broadcast live on our AHO YouTube channel. The audio and video are being recorded, as have all the past days, and we will post files of this recording to the AHO FTP site. You can also view the YouTube recording on the AHO YouTube channel. Assisting me today are all the staff we've had all along: Nicole Mullen, Amy Blunk, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Wooldridge. We will hopefully not take any breaks today because I anticipate we'll get this done. But if we need a little longer, then we will, of course, take breaks. I will carry over the appearances from the past days. But if there's anyone who happens to be here just for today and you haven't yet introduced yourself, you're a little late to the party, but we welcome you. Is there anyone who's new and just joining us today who would like to say hello?
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kinsey. This is Josh Fox on behalf of Peter Thiel for Tulare Lake Basin Water Storage District.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Fox. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Great. I think where we left things yesterday, which was wise by Mr. Cooney, that for us to take up this business when we're fresh and awake, dealing with exhibit numbers. Where we left things was to moving North Kern's exhibits, case in chief exhibits, into the evidentiary record. So I think the way we should do this, I propose doing this, is go ahead and deal with North Kern's case in chief exhibits, and then we'll go ahead and do North Kern's cross exhibits if there were any. I just don't recall. And then I'll go through each of the other parties and we'll consider the exhibits used on cross-examination throughout the hearing. And then we will see if there are any other procedural matters or loose ends, and we'll wrap up. If that sounds good, then I will turn to you, Mr. Cooney. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and identify North Kern's case in chief exhibits that you would like to move into the evidentiary record this morning.
Thank you very much, Hearing Officer Coonsey. As we left yesterday, I indicated that we would be making a review of our exhibit list and taking into account the evidence that had been introduced by other parties. And our assessment here this morning is that on balance, it's most prudent and to hopefully avoid any confusion that we are intending to move our entire exhibit list on our identification list. And I won't name them all off. I hope everybody has that list, but it starts with North Kern 5 and it ends with North Kern 159. And it does include several exhibits that were previously introduced in Phase 1A from the City of Bakersfield, documents relating to water supply and such, and we would also intend to move those. So what is the most helpful to you? Do you want me to call them out or just reference them generically as I've suggested? What's preferable?
I think if you would maybe first, and you may have to turn to someone to help, if you can identify the date on which the exhibit list was submitted, just so we can identify it in our files.
I can do it. I wish I had my staff. It is the date in which the submittal date was required. So we have not updated with a second identification list. So that's not very precise.
No, that's fine. Let's just take one moment, and I'm looking, excuse me, while I'm clicking through, and also my team is going to click through. I just want to make sure we have the exhibit list, and then in that case, I think there's no need for you to read it off. And we can save some time.
I'm missing something here. I'm looking at exhibits that start with 102.
You're missing exhibits coming in from 108. If you look at our entire exhibit list, it should start with identification list, North Kern 5. And then there should be a North Kern 32.
Not sure those are on the FTP site.
So here, and Mr. Jacobs, and also first of all, to find the exhibit list, if you look in the FTP folder for this matter, and then hearing phase 1B, and then under the exhibits folder for North Kern, the exhibit identification list is there as both a PDF file and I think a Excel file. It does start with North Kern 5. I think what happened, you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cooney, but I suspect because North Kern 5 was submitted in phase 1A, you did not also submit a copy in phase 1B, which is why the exhibits in that folder start with 102, which are the new exhibits for that we haven't seen before. Okay. If that makes sense. Okay.
That is correct. It's the differentiation between the 1As and the 1Bs. But that exhibit identification list that you referenced is the comprehensive list of all exhibits considered and intended to be introduced in phase 1B.
There's not gonna be a problem in the future if there's a, partial appeal, phase 1B, not phase 1A, and you don't have your entire record in the phase 1B FTP folder.
We have it, so we have it referenced. I think that's Mr. Jacobs, I think that's somewhat of an internal housekeeping issue for the AHO.
Okay.
In our administrative record. I think it's a good point whether we want to copy those exhibits over into this folder. That may make sense. At least we have in our files the exhibits that have been moved in. I think this is an issue that may be true of for other parties as well who have referenced the phase 1A exhibits. So it's, I'd consider that somewhat of an internal housekeeping matter. It is part of the official administrative record. Once we move these into the evidentiary record, they will be part of the evidentiary record. And then you're probably right. It would be a good idea to duplicate those exhibits in the phase 1B folder so our administrative record is easier to identify.
And I do appreciate both Mr. Jacobs' point and yours. And that's exactly our intention is, and let's make sure that we've turned all the square corners and that record is clear, because that's certainly the intent.
Mr. Jacobs, since because you've shown an interest here, do you need more time to take a look at this exhibit list? Do you have concerns about it?
We have no concerns. No concerns. I just want to make sure
the logistics are worked out.
Get it taken care of now. Yep.
Yes, I appreciate that. So, Mr. Cooney, since we've identified this exhibit list and I have identified where it's located on our FTP site, and it was submitted on April 4th with your exhibits, I think I will ask whether you would like to move the exhibits identified on North Kern's phase 1B exhibit identification list into the evidentiary record for phase 1B.
That is precisely our request, that to move each and all of those exhibits identified on the phase 1B exhibit identification list into evidence into phase 1B.
Thank you. And at this time, are there any objections to the acceptance of these exhibits into the evidentiary record? With that, we will accept the identified exhibits into the evidentiary record for phase 1B. And I will turn to you, Mr. Cooney, as to whether there are any exhibits that North Kern used on cross. Are there any that need to be moved into the record as well?
We used exhibits already referenced and no additional exhibits as a cross exhibit standalone, no.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney. I think from there we can move down the list unless there's anything else with North Kern's exhibits, Mr. Cooney. Oh, I recall. I was going to ask, I believe there were some minor corrections to the testimony of at least one of your witnesses and the slides.
Yes.
Would you be willing to submit a corrected version identified with a C? I think we were doing that in another.
Absolutely, we can do that. And just for everybody's recollection, there was, I believe, 2 changes in North Kern 122 that Mr. Ide testified to. And then there was a single change on Mr. Van Camp's Exhibit 125, and we will send, and you have wanted them classified as with a C as compared to a rata. Is that your preference?
I think one of the other parties was going to use a C, so I thought we could be consistent.
We're happy to do it that way,
Okay.
and we will. And we'll get that business done today, just those two changes.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Cooney. Mr. Becerra, I saw you went off mute. Did you have something to add?
I just wanted to know we were the other party that was
I
going.
see. Thank you. From there, I will turn to KWBA, Mr. O'Brien. I received, or our office received, an index of the exhibits used by KWBA on cross. At this time, would you like to move KWBA 415 through 420 and 423 into the evidentiary record for phase 1B?
I'm going to ask Ms. Tokar to handle this part.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Ms. Tokar.
Yes, we would, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you. And are there any objections to accepting these exhibits into the evidentiary record? KWBA 415 through 420 and 423 are accepted into the evidentiary record. Is there anything else, Ms. Tokar or Mr. O'Brien, with respect to KWBA's exhibits that you think we need to address at this time?
I don't think so. We did submit an updated exhibit identification index with that email this morning, and it's in our upload FTP site. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Yes, I saw that, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will then turn to Mr. Becerra. I also saw that Buena Vista submitted a list of cross exhibits, which I will read off now to make sure I have right. At this time, does Buena Vista wish to move into evidence exhibits Buena Vista 800 through 805, 808 and 809, 811 and 812?
Yes, please.
Are there any objections to accepting these exhibits? All right, the exhibits are accepted into the evidentiary record. And is there anything else, Mr. Becerra, with respect to Buena Vista's exhibits that we need to discuss or clean up at this time?
No, we should have our corrected exhibits posted today, and I can circulate them by email as well if people would like that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Jacobs, does KCWA have cross exhibits to move into the record?
We do. We have those 3 cross exhibits.
Will you identify them for me, please? I just don't have them here.
It's KCWA cross 1, KCWA cross 2, and KCWA cross 3. They're in the folder.
Simple enough. At this time, do you wish to move KCWA cross 1, cross 2, and cross 3 into the evidentiary record?
Yes, please.
And are there any objections to this? With that, they are accepted into the evidentiary record. And Mr. Jacobs, is there anything else we need to discuss about KCWA's exhibits?
Well, Ms. Melton did have a correction to her testimony, and we could update that. And I think we would probably do that. There was reference to a 1964 amendment to the Mohegan.
Yes.
Instead of having that as a new exhibit, why don't we just reference it in one of the other parties' exhibits, so we don't have to add anything new? Does that make sense?
No, you lost me.
Okay. Well, we laid out sort of her understanding of the key law of the river documents
Yes.
as part of her testimony,
Yes,
and each one was then an exhibit.
I
So
see.
we could add reference to the 64 amendment and refer to the exhibit by a different party's exhibit number without having to add a new exhibit.
I see. Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, we'll get that done. And we'll also update our exhibit list to include the cross exhibits.
Thank you. And then Mr. Pierce, I just don't recall, did Bakersfield have any cross exhibits to move into the record?
No, we did not, Ms. Coonsey. We had no exhibits at this part of the hearing.
Thank you. Did I miss any? Is there anyone else who is seeking to move exhibits into the evidentiary record, or is there anything that I missed at this point? I was going to talk next a little bit about just our upcoming schedule, but are there any other procedural issues that we should address? Either about this portion of the hearing we're just completing, or the rebuttal portion that's upcoming? Mr. O'Brien.
I have one small item, Ms. Kinsey. We will be presenting rebuttal testimony by Nick Torres. And we had some discussion about Mr. Torres earlier in the proceeding. I did want to reiterate my prior offer to make Mr. Torres available for deposition between now and June 20th, so that Mr. Becerra or anyone else involved in this hearing will have a full and fair opportunity to question him. So I just wanted to make that offer on the record.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Becerra, did you care to chime in? I'm only once again picking on you because you went off mute, which you're welcome to do. But
If Mr. Torres is a rebuttal expert, I'm sorry, a rebuttal witness, I assume we'll see written testimony on May 23rd, and we'll go from there.
yes, that would be I concur in that plan. With that, I think it's a good segue into the schedule. In accordance, I believe it's my February 9th procedural ruling. The schedule that we have laid out is the deadline for rebuttal exhibits is May 23rd. Deadline for parties to file written evidentiary motions, June 6th. The deadline for responses to those motions is June 13th. And then we have the rebuttal portion of the hearing scheduled to begin on June 20th. At this point, I don't anticipate, from my perspective, any need for a pre-hearing conference or a meeting before that time. I think we all know the routine, but I'm open if there are any other issues or you think there would be good reason for us to plan to meet before June 20th. We can talk about that. Or if you have any other procedural issues we should talk about before we close up this portion of the hearing today.
This is Scott Cuny, hearing officer Coonsey.
Yes.
I'm not certain that there is any need for a status conference, but I know how busy each and all of us are. And I'm wondering if it just wouldn't be prudent to have one on the calendar, because we're going to have our submittals on the 23rd. And as you outlined, the objections and whatever they may be. I don't know what will manifest from that, if anything, but I just think it may be prudent to have something on the calendar so that we could address whatever that is in advance.
Understood. And then one question I would have is, should we do that after the evidentiary motions are due on June 6th?
That probably would be most prudent. People will make a evidentiary submittal, and then there'll be some or none in terms of objections, and then we'll know what, if anything, is deserving of attention. I think that may be after the 6th.
So if we were to do this, I think it would make the most sense to look at the week of the 6th, after the 6th, but the week of the 6th, sometime through the 7th through 10th, to hold, as you suggest, to hold a time for us to get together. I don't know if that's feasible even now with all of our schedules, but
right.
Let's have all of you take a look at your schedules for the 7th through the 10th. I think at this point, as I indicated, I don't anticipate that, from my perspective, that we need it, but it's Mr. Cuny, your point's well taken, that something may come up, and then it would be good to have a time already set. And so what we would do is we would schedule this, and then if any of you had an issue that came up that you thought deserved attention and we needed to meet, you would please file something and essentially asking for us to keep the conference on the calendar. Otherwise, the default would be that I would vacate that conference if I hadn't heard anything by, I don't know, we can set a deadline for that, but let's set the date for the pre-hearing conference first. I will turn to you, Mr. Cuny, since we're starting with you. Do you have any dates you're not available between the 7th and the 10th?
Amazingly, I'm good for any of those 4 days
Okay.
that week.
All right. Mr. O'Brien.
Ms. Kinsey, I'm leaving on a brief vacation on Friday the 10th, but I could do it any day that week before the 10th.
Thank you. Mr. Becerra, I'll turn to you next.
If we're talking about 9 a.m., the morning of the 8th is what would work for me,
All right.
working with Mr. O'Brien's schedule.
So the current proposal is 9 a.m. on the 8th. I will continue around the room. Mr. Jacobs, this is my virtual room. It's probably not the same as yours, but Mr. Jacobs.
I can do the afternoon of the 7th, and I can do any time on the 8th or the 9th.
All right, thank you. Who else do we, I'm trying not to repeat. Mr. Pierce, I will turn to you.
Ms. Coonsey, I'm going to be out of the country hopefully that week, but my partner Jolie and Ainsley can cover for me. We've already arranged it that if anything were to come up that week, she's available. And plus, we're not, obviously, as you can tell, we're not taking an incredibly active role in this phase of the hearing. So I'm totally fine if you schedule it the week of June 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. I appreciate that.
State the name of your partner again. I didn't get it.
I think the court reporter was asking for you to slowly say the name of your partner.
Jolie Ann Ainsley.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce.
Thank you.
And I will just go, I'm continuing around the room. Ms. Spalletta, would you be planning to join us, and are you available?
Those times work.
Okay. And I will just ask, in the interest of time, please speak up. Is there anyone else who would have a concern or a conflict and can't find a substitute if we were to schedule a pre-hearing conference for June 8th, starting at 9 a.m.? All right, we will tentatively schedule for June 8th at 9 a.m. with the intent that if I don't, if I don't hear anything from all of you by the end of the day on Monday, the 6th, June 6th, then I will send out probably just a quick notice by email vacating the conference. So please let me know by the end of the day on June 6th if you think there are any matters that we should meet and discuss. Is there anything else we should talk about before we break until either June 6th or, June 8th or June 20th, depending?
Ms. Kinsey, I'd like to make a suggestion about the deadlines for filing evidentiary motions and responses.
Please. Yeah.
Just to give you a little more time to process them ahead of when we're putting witnesses on. I think it might work to move those deadlines to June 3rd and June 10th. We have certainly learned a lot about your perspectives on evidentiary motions and can calibrate accordingly. And
yes.
It's very important we be able to process whatever your rulings might be ahead of time. So if we could buy you an extra couple days, I think it might be worth that.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra. Are there any objections to, and I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the importance of hearing from me. So are there any objections to moving the deadline for filing evidentiary motions up from June 6th to June 3rd? And then the deadline for responses, moving that from June 13th to June 10th? All right, let's do that. Thank you, Mr. Becerra. And I will issue a written ruling based on our discussion today. So we have all of this in writing and with an updated schedule in it. So we have that clear. Anything else? Wonderful. Well, thank you. It's been good to be with you for all this time. We made it through, and I appreciate all of you. I appreciate your witnesses joining us. It's so important. I know, to some extent they're doing their job, but it's really quite helpful. And I appreciate all of you and your good work and getting through this. And I will see you either June 8th or June 20th. And until then, take care. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I just interrupt and ask for Mr. Becerra's and maybe have some spellings I can't find in all the exhibits or something.
Yes, this is Mr. Becerra. It sounded like you might have a question for me.
Just, I was just requesting emails from at least a couple of you, just in case I run across something I can't discern.
Oh, okay.
Or find in the exhibits, some kind of terminology or spelling, or who knows what might come up.
Certainly. So here comes my email address.
Okay, I'm ready.
R as in red, S as in Sam, B as in boy, at B as in boy, K as in kite, S as in Sam, lawfirm.com.
Great. Anyone else want to offer theirs up, or even Miss Mullins or any other email, just in case I have any issues?
This is Kevin O'Brien. I'll give you mine. It's KOBRIEN at Downeybrand, all one word, DOWNEYBRAND.com.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Pleasure working with you.
Thank you.